Next, tragedy strikes, accidents happen. Be there when the calls come in. It's back-to-back episodes of Rescue 911. Next on Discovery Health Channel.
This is 911. Do you have an emergency?
Today on Rescue 911, an emergency at sea.
She was in a panic.
An underwater adventure means deep trouble.
This wasn't just a distressed diver. I had a diver that was dying.
Watch as friends take the plunge to save a life.
We're very concerned for her that she might not make it.
Life should not only be measured by what we get out of it, but also by what we do to help others. I'm William Shatner. Tonight, true stories of real heroes whose concern and confidence make a difference on Rescue 911.
We begin on October 11th, 1992, as Jody Farber and a group of friends were enjoying a diving trip off the Florida Keys. Experienced divers, they were all too aware that the sea is not forgiving.
This is an annual event that we come down to Marathon for a 4-day dive trip.
You're clear, Jody.
Mark James and his wife, Pat, had only been married a month.
How's that?
Pat's a very conservative diver. The first day she was a little too scared because of the current.
Okay, good deal.
But the second day, we had no reason to believe that anything was going to be out of the usual.
Pat asked my husband, Ken and I, if she could buddy with us that day.
Okay, air on, air.
On this 60-foot dive we were doing, Pat stayed real close to us. This reef is known for its big fish. So Ken decided on this dive that he'd rather take his pole spear with in case he could see a nice big grouper or something good for dinner. I had just checked and made sure that we all were okay, that we all were at 1,000 pounds of air. And I was looking around to see what else there was that I could play with or what else I could take some pictures of. Signaling me that she was out of air. And I just couldn't believe she was out of air because I knew she wasn't. But yet she was in a panic. Her eyes were just as huge as saucers. So you react to that signal. When she got my regulator in her mouth, she was holding on to that with both hands. And she was making this horrible sound under the water. That was a scary sound to hear. I turned to see where Ken was, my husband, because I wanted him to come and assist us. And he had turned his back to us to look at something in the reef. When I turned back to look at Pat, she had passed out. That's when I really knew that this wasn't just a distressed diver. I had a diver that was dying.
When we continue,
I realized it was my wife, and then I felt the most incredible feeling of helplessness I've ever felt in my life.
Tonight, from mingling to mating, experts take a look at what drives our attractions. Is procreation the true libido lifter? It's a candid look at our sex appeal on sex, gender, and desire. Tonight on Discovery Health Channel.
While diving 60 feet below the surface in the Florida Keys, Pat James passed out, leaving her life in the hands of her friend, Jody Farber.
The main thought in my mind at that point was just to get Pat to the surface as fast as I could without us dying or both of us getting bent.
We got a problem.
Diving instructor Randy Shell heard Jody's cries for help.
Jody was panicking, not so much for fear of herself, but for her buddy.
I got her arms. Get her legs. That's good. Watch that equipment. Watch the equipment. Okay.
I pulled her up on the boat and rolled her over on her side, and then it became very obvious that she had drowned. She was attempting to breathe, even though she was unconscious.
Let's get some help. Let's get these other people up.
After several expulsions of water, she basically regained consciousness just for a minute and screamed for help.
You get some oxygen here. Everybody, what happened, Randy? What's happening? What's going on?
Pat's husband, Mark, heard the commotion and came over.
I realized it was my wife.
Come on, baby, push it up.
She was the most awful gray color I'd ever seen anybody in my life. I was on the edge of just falling apart. And then I felt the most incredible feeling of helplessness I've ever felt in my life.
The captain of the ship radioed to have paramedics meet them at the dock.
Diving side, sea faring.
Throughout the 40 minutes it took to get Pat back to shore, they continued to give her oxygen.
Randy and everybody kept saying, oh, you did good, you did good. But my thought was, I did good, but did I bring up a vegetable? Was Pat going to be okay after all of that?
Monroe County paramedics Jurgen Nicola and Kathleen Dobbins were waiting to treat Pat.
Okay, what happened?
When we got on the boat, she was curled up in a ball, almost in what I would say a fetal position, and she was breathing, but you could hear that there was bubbles in her lung sounds.
Let's get her on her left side.
It was pretty conclusive that she had a lot of salt water in her lungs, and she wasn't getting enough oxygen into her bloodstream because it was filling up with water.
Okay, all right, Pat.
So in a sense, she was actually almost drowning in her body fluids.
Okay, Pat, how you doing, Pat? Huh?
Her blood pressure was dropping and her pulse was increasing.
All right, good. Good flow. We got a good flow here. I'm gonna tape it down.
Okay.
Pat, how you doing? How you feeling?
We were very concerned for her that she might not make it.
Okay, I'm gonna get Pat on her left side.
Med 6
okay?
Fisherman's Hospital, priority 1.
The hospital gave us a go-ahead to give Lasix, which clears up the lungs so that a patient can breathe better.
Go. You got it. Is it running? She's going into shock.
Okay.
Every paramedic's concern or outcome is to make their patient, I believe, better than when they found them. She was getting worse. She was deteriorating.
A Metro-Dade air rescue helicopter transported Pat to Mercy Hospital in Miami, where she was put in a hyperbaric chamber. Her husband, Mark, rejoined her there.
Right off the bat, I told her I loved her and that I was glad to see she was doing well. And I told her, I said, when all this is over, we're going to sit down and have a good cry together. And we're going to get her back home just as soon as we can.
Pat was released 2 days later without any permanent injuries. The accident had occurred when a new mouthpiece disconnected from a regulator hose and she breathed in water.
I can remember the thought going through my head that I was going to die, that I was never going to see my husband again. We'd only been married 4 weeks. I thought it wasn't fair. I felt so sad and so cheated. And now that we still have a chance to do all these things, I have so much to look forward to.
Mark turned to me when we were on the boat with tears just streaming down his face and said, "Thank you, thank you." He said, "You were the only person that I would have wanted her to have been with when this would have happened, because you saved her life."
Every day I realize that I was incredibly lucky to have Jody with me, that I'm extremely fortunate just to be here today.
Come on, Mark, I don't know.
2 months later, Pat went diving again.
Bonsai.
The crisis of having to go through this with someone and knowing how close to death she actually was makes me so glad and so happy that we have been given a second chance. And we both know what it takes now to make a good marriage after having been through a couple already for each of us. We believe we were intended to be together.
Next, step inside the command center where the calls for help are answered and meet the real-life heroes who save lives. Stay tuned for another episode of Rescue 911, next on Discovery Health Channel. Real life, medicine, miracles.
Mr. Shapiro, step out of the car, please.